Howdy, y'all. I am so excited. Have y'all seen the new Freelancer DLC? If not, then go watch the new cutscene right now, because I'll definitely be talking about it. We're actually getting lore on the canon Freelancer. There are two kinds of Freelancers. The canon Freelancer, the one I like to call Finch, who has his own set personality and story. They're the person with almost black hair that I'm drawing right now. Since they have no canon design, I have to come up with one myself. However, Stitch has made it clear that we aren't forced to stick with that story. That's where the second Freelancer comes in. The second Freelancer is literally anything. It's whoever the player wants them to be. If this Freelancer is rich, then so be it. If this Freelancer is poor, then so be it, etc. You get the point. You control what and who this Freelancer is. Most people like using the second Freelancer, but if you're like me, you prefer sticking to the canon Freelancer, who again I like to call Finch. He was given somewhat of an official nickname in the Black Dusk file, and so I intend on using it. The moment I heard of the DLC and watched the cutscene, I knew the Freelancer theory had to come next. I was originally going to do my first non-character theory, but this was more relevant. Plus, I'm far too excited about the DLC. I want to see just how much of their story I can theorize correctly. Viewer, if you're watching after the DLC is done, was I right or wrong? I already had a theory on Finch before the prelude cutscene came out, and my theory did not change. In fact, the prelude just provided more evidence for it. Spoilers for the new cutscene and all of Entry Point. Who is Harvey? Who is Jade? And I think I already fell in love with Dmitry. That little wave just stole my heart away. I am ecstatic. Once in the Epic Entry Point Clan Discord server, Dart said, "Oh, Sish might be working on a little something. Don't tell anyone though." And ever since then, I've been pondering what it was, and this must be it. The new characters look fantastic. Dimitri's just as handsome as Hemlock and Nightshade. I have to remind myself not to get too attached because Dimitri's likely dead now. Sigh. Finch is a far too overlooked character. Every time I explained my theory to someone, they always said, "Oh, he can't have a theory, he's the protagonist." That isn't true. Just because he's the protagonist doesn't mean he's not a character. I know how Stitch is with characters at this point. She wouldn't skin them over like that. I love the Freelancer, I love Dmitry, fight me. This is a challenge, come fight me. Anyways, theory time. We'll kick Finch's story off with the new cutscene prelude. Finch is waiting by a van, preparing to go inside someplace with a new character, Harvey. They go inside and meet Jade and Dmitry, both of them looking very good. Jade knows Harvey, but makes it clear she hasn't seen Finch before. Jade's a little on the prissy side, but that's fine. Dmitry doesn't speak in this cutscene, but Jade describes him as a teddy bear. They all need to meet this broker dude that one of them is blackmailing. Oops. Harvey and Finch didn't know that Jade and Dmitry were going to be there, and it appears that Jade isn't too happy with Harvey at the moment due to a previous job. The broker speaks to them through a screen and says they all have jobs to do. That's the end of Prelude. When the main storyline begins, Finch just finished robbing a miniature bank when Ren calls them and pays them to do a job. They are then recruited to Halcyon and assigned to retrieve Rose from Wargate. Once they do, they're added to Ren and Rose's squad, who coordinate them. While waiting for Rose one day, Jackdaw surprises Finch by pulling a gun to his head and telling him to give a message to the director. Rose begins showing off odd behavior and Finch is concerned, but she insists that it's nothing to worry about. Note from the future, it is something to be concerned about. You're going to be a little lost in this theory if you haven't seen my Rose one yet. Self-promotion time. Go watch the Rose theory. Anyways, later Ren is ordered to assassinate Finch. This confuses them because they never did anything wrong. Jackdaw suddenly appears and kills Ren, saving Finch. Finch now works for Phoenix and demands to see Rose. It was honestly adorable when he crossed his arms at Jackdaw. Is it just me, or was that not intimidating? It was just pathetic and cute. Jackdaw then reveals that Rose is dead. Halcyon assassinated her because she was a secret informant for Phoenix all along. This is also why they tried to take out Finch. It was a safety precaution. Finch retrieves Rivera after she defects to Phoenix, and later, information about the bunker from the SCRS. They soon infiltrate that bunker in Black Dusk, and plant timed bombs in there, sacrificing themselves and taking Halcyon down with them. Although they're number 4 on the most wanted list, they would never get caught even if they were still alive. They don't have a picture of Finch, or even a name. Surprisingly, it's not lock code time. After the summary I usually open by reading a lock file, but Finch doesn't have one. Maybe that'll change in the DLC. We're diving straight in this time. I think it's safe to say that Finch and Harvey's relationship is close or sibling-like. Considering from the way they talk to each other, they both have been doing crime together for some time. Plus, Harvey says, quote, "We look out for each other, don't we?" End quote. They definitely seem trusting of each other. Jade notes that Harvey is a mediocre thief. A mediocre thief, you say? Based on that, it's safe to say that Finch is a mediocre thief as well. In The Freelancer, Finch is first seen robbing a bank, a very, very small bank. It's safe to say they're used to only robbing small buildings. I already had this theory for a while, and the cutscene is only helping promote it. Thanks, cutscene. In Prelude, before they go into the building, Finch says that it'll be dangerous. That's an odd thing to know if they've been doing crime for some time. It's always dangerous. Even Harvey says, quote, "That's never stopped us before," end quote. What I believe Finch meant is, this is a little new to them. They're used to robbing smaller things. This job is much bigger and much more risky. Plus, Harvey had to remind Finch to not hesitate to pull the trigger if things got messy, which also makes sense. According to a BuzzFeed interview with a former robber, he said in all of his years of bank robbing he never once had to hurt anyone. The intimidation of a weapon is enough to keep people in line. To drive the point home even more, Jade said she wasn't planning on inviting Harvey anywhere again after the previous mission. Jade doesn't know who Finch is, so that means Finch didn't come. Since obviously Jade and Dmitry are more used to dangerous missions and Harvey and Finch aren't, it's safe to assume that Harvey probably screwed something up and the mission was deemed a failure. Considering all this, and the fact that Harvey seems much more willing to do crime than Finch, I have a few speculations on my hands. Because of Finch's hesitancy and initial wariness, because it looks like Harvey has a tendency to drag Finch into things without his consent. He might have even been the one who encouraged Finch to start crime with him. I do believe it's because of Harvey that Finch grew into crime in the first place. Harvey is definitely much more ready to do stuff like this, so that's established. Next is Finch's behavior. Honestly, in the beginning, it was looking like Finch had zero personality, which is similar to most protagonists, unfortunately. But analyzing his dialogue and actions, I think I figured it out. Finch is very curious. They ask a lot of questions in this game. Here's a challenge. Play Entry Point all over again and count how many times Finch asked a question or was curious about something. Spoiler alert, it was a lot of times. They try to come off as serious, intimidating, or professional, but since he's not either of those things personally, those attempts often fail, which can result in pathetic yet adorable attempts when confronting someone. Retribution. No matter how much Finch denies it, they're definitely somewhat of a cutie. Oh, and they have trust issues. When Rose says she'll be coordinating Finch in the Rose cutscene, Finch responds with, quote, "Looking forward to working with you," end quote. There's a little bit of hesitancy in their voice there. Perhaps because they're a little put off by her social behavior, or they don't trust her. There's more. In the withdrawal, Finch and Sparrow exchange a conversation. This is one of their first times talking to each other. Quote, "Finch, my job is done. What about yours, Sparrow?" Sparrow,
"Is that how you talk to your getaway pilot?"
Finch, "Yes," end quote. That's a little bit of a "I'm ending this conversation" tone. There's even more. When Jackdaw saves them, they should be grateful. But when he tries talking to Finch, they shut him down. Quote, "Save it. I don't want to hear it right now." End quote. Honestly, their behavior was super easy to detect for me. I can sort of relate to the trust issues thing. But why would Finch have trust issues? Well, obviously, something bad happened that broke their trust. So much that it ruined their security that they can trust anyone at all. And I'm certain the cause of it was a form of betrayal. That's right, I suspect that we're gonna see some treason in the new Freelancer DLC. I have some theories. Either Jade, Dmitry, Harvey, or another new character we haven't met yet betrays Finch. I do believe that Harvey is going to be the one that gives Finch his gun. And it would be a super big punch in the gut if afterwards they betrayed Finch. It would change the meaning of the gift entirely. We've already established that Harvey is a little selfish. Well, maybe not selfish, but he tends to drag Finch into trouble with him. Who knows, maybe when it truly came down to it, Harvey would choose his own life over Finch, and that would be the form of betrayal. Or they would end up attacking Finch. Or perhaps, a more loyal and dramatic route. As Harvey lies dying on the ground, he gives Finch to customize Raven. Perhaps after sacrificing himself to save Finch's life from the traitor. Ooh, this could get dramatic. Of course those things I suggested are only loose speculation, since we don't know enough yet. But we do know it's likely that at some point in the DLC, there will be wounds that leave scars. So Finch has this hard shell surrounding them due to their trust issues. And some girl, Rose, starts trying to break through that shell. Although they resisted at first, we see that Rose succeeds in tearing down those walls and befriending them, becoming so close that their friendship is sibling-like. In my Rose theory, I already proved that Rose saw Finch as a sibling, and now it's time to prove that that isn't one-sided. In Retribution, Finch says they just have to see Rose. They demand it. Dude, last you checked, Rose was in an organization that was against you. Although she was a Phoenix informant all along, they don't know this when they say it. So they're risking their own life, with a good chance that Rose will value their loyalty to Halcyon over her friendship to Finch. Yeah, that's trust, and desperation. They see Rose as a sister. Finch becomes greatly depressed after learning the truth about Rose. Makes sense. After they finally earned the courage to trust and care about someone again. So much that they'd risk their own life to just see her. It turns out she was dead. Even more heartbreaking. She wasn't as trustworthy as they thought. She had a secret, a devastating one. She was a Phoenix informant. I'm pretty sure Finch got over the Phoenix informant thing pretty fast. They trusted and loved Rose enough to forgive her. It was the grief that wore them down. But they still shut themselves in even more. Another trust that led to another heartbreak. For a while, they're even more hostile than ever. After they learn about Rose, they tell Jackdaw they're gonna have a long talk after this is all over. That's never good news. On the outside, they keep their posture, but on the inside, they're shredded. Another betrayal, another heartbreak. That's all they seem to get. They are furious, which is why they say they want to talk to Jackdaw. Good timing, Thunder. In their grief and devastation, they think there's someone to blame. Who would that be? Jackdaw. They believe Jackdaw put Rose in danger, which they're wrong about. Jackdaw and Rose both knew the risks. Even if he predicted it, Jackdaw couldn't stop it. Despite trying to keep his posture, he even accuses Jackdaw in retribution. Quote, "You got her killed." End quote. Finch is now even more shut in, not wanting to let anyone in, not wanting to let this happen ever again. But that shell is broken once again, by Jackdaw himself. In the Jackdaw cutscene, we get to see Finch and Jackdaw bonding, which means at some point they obviously grew close, but they never managed to get over their grief and pain before they die. In the payoff cutscene, we get to see that Finch is so depressed they are speechless. They can't even be bothered to respond to Jackdaw when he's talking to them, which is saying a lot considering they're always asking questions. They don't say a word as they just sit in the dark, gun in hand, hiding. And unlike Rose, they aren't that great at hiding their sadness. Their feelings are clearer than the atmosphere in 2020 because everyone's in quarantine. They also develop a friendship of Sparrow, or at least get used to her. They stopped being so mean to the scientists. We can also see that although Finch doesn't even know Rivera, they're strangely friendly towards her. That's rather uncharacteristic of them. This can mean three things. Either Jackdaw truly did make Finch feel comfortable enough that they dropped their trust issues, which can't be true, because they knew Rose longer and still kept their trust issues. Or they knew Rivera beforehand, but there's no evidence supporting that, so that can't be true either. And the last thing that makes the most sense, for a short while Finch follows the Rose route. They try being happier by acting happier. Coming from personal experience, a reasonable thing to try, but they soon drop it after realizing it wasn't working. Does Finch have depression? Let's see. Let's try diagnosing him with chronic depression. Let's knock out the symptoms one by one. These are the symptoms according to WebMD.com. Depressed all day? Yup. Loss of enjoyment in hobbies? We don't know Finch's hobbies, so we're gonna have to say no. Though I do headcanon they like motorcycles because they know how to ride one and they rode one after the Freelancer. Major weight change? We don't know how much he weighs, we have to say no. Insomnia or excessive sleep? Well, he was staying up in payoff, but it could have been just for Jackdaw, so we'll have to say maybe. Run down or restless in a noticeable way? Yup. Fatigue, we don't know. Problems with decision making, we don't know. And suicide thoughts, we don't know. Are y'all noticing the same thing I am? We don't know enough about Finch to determine if they have depression, so we're unable to create an official diagnosis for him. Well, Finch may be a little suicidal. In the epilogue cutscene, Finch says they and Jackdaw both knew this was a suicide mission. Whether he was doing it for Jackdaw, Rose, or himself, either way they were willing to end it all. They were ready to go. If Jackdaw knew they were going to die, he clearly wasn't prepared for it, as he pleads to Finch that there's still time. But no, there wasn't any time. But now that begs the question, was there truly no time? Did they just know it was the end? Or did they die willingly, ready to join Rose in the clouds? No, Finch did not want to die or to end themselves, but they were definitely ready to. What I mean by that is, if Finch could save themselves they could, but if they couldn't, they wouldn't be disappointed. Summary time. Finch and Harvey are close friends who are in crime together. They're supposed to meet up with the broker, whoever they are, and discover they're going to be teaming up with Jade and Dmitry. At some point in the DLC, Finch is given the Raven and is betrayed, which leaves them with heavy trust issues. Later, Ren calls up Finch with a job, and they're soon recruited to Halcyon. They save Rose and she tries to befriend them. Due to their trust issues, they're a little shunning at first, but Rose breaks through that shell eventually and they become incredibly close. Ren then tries to assassinate Finch, but instead is killed by Jackdaw and Jackdaw saves Finch. They continue to be cold to Jackdaw and Sparrow because they lack trust in them, and things only get worse when they learn of Rose's death and betrayal. They start becoming depressed and gain a grief for Rose that they never fully recover from. They try multiple ways of coping with this sadness, but none of them work. The only way that seems to work is spending time with Jackdaw, who he finally befriends, and they become close too. Finally, Finch goes into the bunker, plants the bombs, and takes down Halcyon. They successfully avenge Rose, at the cost of their own life. And that's that. I personally headcanon that Finch likes motorcycles and he wears a rose all the time after Retribution. Not only does it look nice on them, it's also symbolism to represent he's in Phoenix for revenge for Rose, and that they never managed to let go of their grief for her. But there's no way Finch survived the blast. Not only is it logically impossible, Sish herself confirmed that yes, they are dead. Oh my god, it's almost the 15-minute mark. Well, see y'all.